Hello, everyone. We're happy today to have Ben Nassau talking to us today about the case for inquiry-based learning. Ben, take it away.
Thanks. First, so glad to be here. So excited and happy to reconnect with old friends and get the chance to talk about a thing that I'm passionate about, and also hang out with fellow nerds and check in with friends during these crazy digital times that we live in. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Hey all, I'm Ben. That's me. My name's on the slide there. I'm minimizing people's faces for now, but maybe I will see your faces in a moment. Let's dive right in, shall we? Okay, so I thought we would start with a little game just for fun, just a little game. And that is Name the Scholar. Okay. What we do each day has an impact on whether or not society continues to thrive. When there is a war in the world, it not only affects those who are fighting, but the loved ones of those in the war as well. If we want the world to continue on, we should treat our home in the best way possible, not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Name that scholar. Who said this?
Is it Ben Nassau?
Is it
It is-
Winston Churchill?
It is not Ben Nassau, nor is it Winston Churchill. I'll take one more guess.
All right, for reference, I have a recording that says otherwise, but I'll accept it for now.
Wait, damn. It has to be someone war-minded.
Damn is incorrect. I'm sorry.
Damn is incorrect. I will reveal. This was a student of mine this past semester. Next round of Name That Scholar. We must be cognizant of the implications of classism in our education system. I firmly believe that the wage relationship in our nation is our most pressing issue. Classism is not carried out by any particular oppressive persons, but is a necessary condition of our entire economy. One of the most detrimental aspects of this is its impact on our education system. We are, quite literally, setting up our underprivileged children to fail in the future. If they are born poor, they stay poor. Name that scholar.
That's Steve, your other student from this quarter.
Steve is incorrect.
Jeff, your other student.
Oh,
Ryan?
Steve is incorrect.
Is it Friedman or Thomas Sowell or someone like that?
This was a student, a she/her student. All these names are changed. But yes, this was another.
I feel this game is rigged.
That never bet against the house. We're mathematicians. We know this. Anyway, yes, this was another student of mine this past semester. And so one of the questions that I want to pose for you today is, how do we get students like this? One more. Name that scholar. I frequently hear students, including myself, okay, maybe you know that this is a student of mine, perhaps. I frequently hear students, including myself, ask why we would ever need to learn this. I personally didn't think I would need to learn any of this math unless I was becoming a mathematician or becoming a math teacher. I would sometimes use that thought as a reason to slack off. I wouldn't try as hard in math as I would in other subjects because I thought I was wasting my time. I couldn't have been more wrong, and this final helped show me that. Okay, this is also a student. Yes, fair. And so another question that I want to prompt you today is, how do we get critical thinking like this? So both critical thinking in the sense of having students who are cognizant and articulate enough in order to recognize and say these things, as well as critical thinking in the sense of students who are willing to tell us this, right? I'm sure we've all heard the refrain of, I hate math, I'm bad in it, I don't like it, whatever. And qualifier for the talk, I'm coming at this as a professor. Presumably most of you are TAs and not professors. However, while I may be afforded more control over a class, the things I will talk about today are plenty accessible, promise. So these are the questions, is how do we get students like this and how do we get them to critically think in this way? So now a question for you guys. And here I am going to bring up your faces so I can see. what makes you feel secure as a student? This can be as a grad student or previously if you had professors or teachers who made you feel particularly secure. What makes you feel secure as a student?
I guess like to some extent, like the professor not being like a super total genius, if that makes sense.
Along those lines, when the professor, the GA, is like willing to point out that like they make mistakes too, then when I make them, I'm like, oh, I'm doing what the professor does.
Sure. Someone who's not up on a high pedestal above everybody else, perhaps.
It helps too when professors don't say things like that's obvious or that's clear, because then you feel stupid if you ask, because like a lot of the times it's not obvious to you.
Absolutely. No more damning word in a mathematics classroom than clearly.
Yeah, this two-factor authentication makes me feel pretty secure as a student. Yeah, sorry, I'll stop with the smart ass comments.
I'm happy for jokes. If you couldn't tell yet, I make jokes. I do appreciate that he did immediately turn his video off as a way of anonymizing. Yes, I will say on two-factor, I was very lucky not to be Zoom bombed all year. So for what it's worth, genuinely. Sure. Are there other things that make us feel secure as students outside the realm of professor being high up above as a professor?
I think positive response to questions is helpful for me.
Even may I posit, even when you're wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Positive response to to all questions.
Yes. Attitude helps. Yes. Yes. Obviously, by the way, multiple right answers here. I'm not fishing for any one thing. Okay. So if you ask my students what makes them feel secure as a student, but then if you push, or if you ask me what makes me feel secure as a student, here are a couple of things that I prefer. For me, I'll just briefly go through these. And again, this is not a full list, right? There are multiple right answers. For me, clarity of both expectations and clarity in communication, right? Of what do I need to do? When does it need to be done by? Where does it go? How good am I expecting to be on this? Clarity overall is useful, makes me feel secure that the professor knows what they're doing. Friends, I don't know if coming into this Zoom room, I don't know. Do you guys are you guys friends? Do you guys do you friends?
Depends who you ask me about.
Fair. Sam, are we friends?
Oh, Ben.
I don't know about that, Sam.
Reminder, you're on recording. Oh, I should have said previously. Sorry, if you're watching this recording, please feel free and pause and play along, and do this, and then listen to me spout nonsense.
For me, someone is my friend if and only if they're not Sam.
That is a very strong argument, literally.
Oh, you should have seen that time Sam and Alex just met. I mean, it was awkward. It was sad.
The thing is, like, that's just I know just little enough that it's possible that's not a joke. Anyway, friends or if not friends, at least classmates, right? Someone to turn to while the professor's at the board and say, like, do you have any idea what that means? Or as happened my very first year of grad school, the whole, well, it's 10:30 and we both have to work on this problem set, so let's have at it. That sort of thing makes me feel maybe not the most confident, but at least secure. Teaching. Who here has felt more secure teaching than you ever have as a student, or TAing, I guess I should say here. One of the most, I don't know the right way to say this, the most addicting senses that I've ever had was entering grad school, knowing nothing, feeling completely lost in all my classes, and then being told, please go teach these students about limits, right? And then they would say, hey, what if you do this? And suddenly I would have 10 fully formed examples with zero thought of here's all the reasons this doesn't work. And what about, continuity and differentiability and all this stuff. And standing in front of, a room full of 18-year-olds who had just celebrated prom a couple months back. And I could stand in front of them and say, I know everything. I know so much. I have the power. Maybe didn't make me feel secure as a student in the same way, but certainly is a great source of comfort, I think, for a lot of us. Respect, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Presumably, it's nice to be treated with respect. It makes us feel better. Even positive responses to comments, whether they're correct or wrong. Yeah. I don't think I need to explain that one. Second chances, I think generally a lot of the way that we learn mathematics, or really any skill, juggling perhaps, is to try and then mess up and then try again. He even has the props. To try and then mess up and then try again and then mess up and then try again and then mess up again and then try and then maybe sort of get it. Yes. And then being heard, I think, in general is very nice. Who has ever had a professor or a teacher or a boss who you've said like, hey, I want to tell you something, and then you do, and they're like, cool, and then they do nothing about that thing. That sucks. Yeah. So again, this is obviously not a full list, but this is just some things that I think generally make us feel secure as students. And so in the vein of the questions I asked at the front, my question is, as people who are in the business of educating folks, don't we owe it to our students to give them these things as well? Which is not to say that none of you are doing this, or that all of you are tyrants who are disrespectful and make sure that there are no friends among the whatever. Obviously not, hopefully not. But I think as we move forward, considering how we educate, these are things that should be at the forefront of our minds. Also, let me just take one moment here, as I tend to do when I give talks to grad students, which is just to make sure, have we all heard of imposter syndrome? Do we all know what imposter syndrome is? We're all aware that it's a thing that exists and everyone feels it and it's totally okay, and talk to your friends and loved ones about it. It's really fine. You belong here. Yes? I see lots of thumbs and nods. Good. Just a reminder, because that tends to come up here. So, man, if you thought it's hard being a grad student, try graduating and getting your first professional job in a pandemic. Okay. And one more. What are barriers you would like to see overcome? Here, I mean, as a student in the classroom educationally. Like, what are frustrations you've experienced that you would like to see overcome in future ways of teaching? I think that sentence got away from me, but hopefully you understand. Again, multiple right answers. If you're watching the video, pause, come up with some ideas. We'll be here when you unpause. Welcome back. Okay.
I like it if we could somehow get away from this. I don't remember, like, fixed ability mindset in math. Like, a lot of students seem to think like, oh, I'm dumb, I can't do this once they get something wrong. And I try to tell them like every day, like this is hard for everybody, especially in the beginning. And math is hard and you're just gonna get smarter. But I would like that personally.
I'm just not a math person. I'm just not a math person. I'm just not a driving person. I'm just not a swimming person. Like, I'm just not a math person.
Yeah, Sam is not a driving person, I believe.
Again, I have just little enough context that I don't understand that as a joke, but okay. Other barriers we would like to see overcome in a classroom setting.
It's like one possible answer is that like, this like, does anyone have any thoughts on like how to solve the problem? And like dead silence. So like non-involvement as a somewhat answer to this.
Sure. What we learned in the quantitative reasoning class that I taught, non-response bias, right? Which is by virtue of having a lot of people not respond and then being like, I guess everyone gets it. It's like, no, that's not the conclusion to draw. Someone puts in chat, the fear of being wrong. Absolutely. Again, if we're saying that mistakes are necessary for growth, then the fear of being wrong is very good at stopping you from doing anything, including mistakes. Again, multiple right answers, several things we could put here. Here is my list. Again, these are just some things that I like to focus on when I teach. The first, inaccessibility for working students, which really could just be inaccessibility for students as a whole. But I over the past year have become very cognizant of the number of students who hold full-time jobs or several part-time jobs or work quite a bit. I had a student who would turn in their homework by they had the problems and then they would write all their answers on Post-its and take pictures of their Post-its on their work desk and just send me like emails with attached pictures of Post-its. Ranging all the way to students who were like, I had to fly out for 2 weeks for the thing that I'm doing, right? And I'm just not going to be here for 2 weeks. What do I do? And again, more generally, inaccessibility for students as a whole, folks who need closed captioning, folks who need lectures to be recorded, all sorts of that stuff. Self-defeating attitudes, we brought up, yes, I'm bad at math, and I'm bad at making sandwiches, but I still try. I don't know if that's a true sentence. Please don't investigate that one too much. Inflexible structures or instructors or instructures, which is a dig at Canvas. It really sucks when you're in a position where, a student has had a medical emergency and needs to make up something, and then the professor goes, no, you missed the test, that's a 0, right? That's sort of what I mean by like not very flexible instructors. Or we all, we have the common exam, this is how we've done it all the time, we're never going to change that sort of thing.
I have a question about that one.
Yeah, please.
Do you have any thoughts about clarity versus flexibility? Like sometimes there's a tightrope to walk there. You want to make sure that it's really clear what the rules are going to be and what we're doing, but then you also want to be flexible with the students, but you also want to be firm about certain things that you think are important. Any thoughts on this?
A very good question that we are all still navigating, including myself. However, for me personally, and especially in the context of the past year, I would emphasize flexibility over clarity, just by virtue of, I had a student who, like halfway through the semester, one of their family members died, and they said, what do I do? And I said, who cares? Do the work when you can, we'll figure it out, right? Like this past year, I had a colleague of mine say, like, I've been teaching in crisis mode, right? And crisis mode for me means flexibility wins. It just does. However, in a more normal, whatever that means here. I liken it to this, which is Rowan University, the school at which I teach, which I don't think I said yet, but you can see I've got the school colors and whatever. It's a cool place. I like it. We have an add drop deadline, and we also have a late add drop deadline, like a week later, which was not true at the school where I was in grad school. And I was trying to figure out why does this happen? Why do we have an add drop and a late add drop? They're the same. Like there's no qualitative difference between the two of them. And I mentioned it to my wife, and she said, Ben, if you only had the one, so many students would miss it because that deadline doesn't mean anything, right? It's just nonsense to them. And so then there's late add drop for when they go, oh no, and then they do it. So in terms of clarity versus flexibility, I try to be very, very clear in terms of like, this is the cutoff for when you can turn this in, or this exam must be turned in by 9 p.m. on this Sunday evening, or whatever. And what I have found is generally the percentage that needs the flexibility is small overall, right? It's maybe not like an 80-20, it's not maybe not like a power rule or anything, but generally like on exams, I'll have maybe 5 kids out of 30 that need extensions. And so for me, I stick to clarity for the 25 and I do the flexibility for the 5. Again, a lot of that is tainted by crazy pandemic times, but I think overall, it's hard for me not to feel compassionate, and the compassionate means the flexibility. I don't purport that that's correct necessarily, but that's how I lean.
One other plug on this note for a professor I'm working for right now that I respect a lot, John Eggers. He built in a bunch of flexibility into the syllabus. Like we're dropping the lowest 2 homeworks, we're dropping the lowest exam, we're doing all this stuff. And so now every time something happens, like a student is like, I'm sick, I have this, we're like, it's all right, just don't do your homework. It's already built in. And I think that is also a cool idea.
I will momentarily talk about some things I try to do to be flexible and compassionate, but I'll get there in a second. But a good question, and again, one that I'm still navigating. Where was I on this list? Oh, denial of resources. Denial of resources, I mostly mean of we live in the information era, and we are all millennials. We're not Gen Z yet, are we? This crowd. Some
of them are.
Some are.
The Zoomers, they're here.
I genuinely don't know. Okay, hi, cool. Anyway, we're really good at information. That's what we do. I teach students who were born in this millennium. That's weird, for me personally. Anyway, we live in a world where we're very good at gathering information. That's what we do. And by denial of resources, I mostly mean let's not pretend we don't live in this world, right? Like, how many memes have we seen of like my professor all semester lecturing, blah, 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 the YouTube tutorial, like here it is very clearly explained and you can rewind, right? Like, let's be okay with the fact that there's lots of ways of getting this information. And then lack of benefit of the doubt, this is a particular nitpick, which is when a student says, I have a concussion, and the professor says, I can't give you a makeup until you show me documented evidence. Who cares? I, as a professor, and this maybe won't come as a surprise given all I've said so far, would prefer the benefit of the doubt, would prefer like, great, go rest, and we'll figure it out later. And if someone wants to fake a concussion to get an extension, they probably really need that extension. I would much rather give it to them, you know. Anyway, and of course, many others. This is by no means a complete list, and there are many things that I would like to see overcome. But now let's talk about some of the ways that I like to do that. So The title of the talk is The Case for IBL. IBL is short for Inquiry-Based Learning. Would anyone like to guess as to the definition of inquiry-based learning?
Is it shared responsibility of knowledge?
Okay, that's one of it, and I probably should have put this on slide 2. Okay, fine.
Learning based on inquiry.
Hey, there it is. Yeah, learning focused on asking questions and curiosity and stuff. This is the specific brand of pedagogy that I practice, and it is based on 4 pillars. These are my definitions of these pillars. You might meet other folks who have slightly different interpretations, but this is what I like to say. The first pillar is, Sam, would you like to enlighten us what the first pillar is?
Shared responsibility of knowledge.
I'm so proud of you. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks for sharing that responsibility with me.
There we are. The first one, God, the first one is shared responsibility of knowledge, which is the idea that the job of the student is not to sit there passively and receive information and just sort of get smacked with words coming out of the professor's mouth. I'm ending that sentence before it gets stranger. The job of the student is not just to sit there, and the job of the professor is not just to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, right? But that the ownership of the knowledge should be distributed among all of the people involved, professor included. This is partially to tamp down on the, man, look at that professor way up there, the genius with all the right ideas who never makes mistakes. I could never do that. When in reality, they also have imposter syndrome. You may possibly have heard the phrase before of the sage on the stage versus, do you know the second half, anyone? The guide on the side. Hey, if I can use concave up looks like a cup for my students, fine, I'll take this bad mnemonic. Anyway, so this is shared responsibility of knowledge, which can come in many forms, but this is how I interpret. The second big pillar is collaboration and community. This is more or less what it sounds like. Everyone in the class is involved in getting through the class and learning the material. Students are resources to be used by one another. The professor is a resource to be used. Excuse me. I coughed my train of thought away. Community and collaboration, and I might have more to say on it later, I guess.
You were saying that students are to be used as resources and the professor is to be used as a resource.
That is true, and I don't remember what comes after that, though I appreciate it, thank you. I'm sure I had something wonderful and clever here, but instead, I'll move on to the third pillar. IBL rewards diversity of experience and engagement. Here, diversity of experience, I mean in the diversity, equity, inclusion sense, in terms of different lived experiences, different levels of accessibility, different working backgrounds, different races and genders, and on and on and on. And then diversity of engagement, I mean in the sense of having multiple modalities of learning, right? Folks who would rather read things, folks who would rather listen to things, folks who would rather record themselves doing stuff, folks who'd rather type things online, folks who'd rather speak up during class, right? Having multiple different ways of accessing the thing to be taught. And lastly, self-reflective critical thinking, which, as you saw at the start, is sort of vital in my class. Self-reflective critical thinking, both for the students and the professor, the students to take a step back and say, okay, how is my learning going? How am I doing as a student? What does it mean to be learning these things? Why should I be doing so? And as an instructor, self-reflective critical thinking of, is this the best that I can be doing, right? What can be improved? What is going wrong? You know, the usual things that we probably stay up late and worry about. Yes? Yeah. One thing to emphasize here for IBL, and I sort of hinted at this by saying that these are my takes on them, is that IBL is a big tent sort of pedagogy, which is to say there are many, many, many right ways of doing IBL. There are many different practices, many of which I don't do. Just because I do something doesn't mean it's the right way of doing it. Just because I don't doesn't mean it's not. There are many ways of doing this. Again, sort of the 4 pillars of like shared responsibility of knowledge, community, diversity, and engagement. And as long as you teach with those in mind and build things with those in mind, you're doing IBL as far as I'm concerned. There are many ways of getting into IBL by virtue of it being Big Tent. You can do what I did, which was frantically search everything I could online prior to starting a new job in a pandemic. You could also do what is probably more intelligent, which is ask some friends, right? Talk to some people, reach out to professors you know or like, or people you've heard of. Everyone is happy and eager to share resources, at least as far as I've discovered. For what it's worth, I'm also a white guy doing STEM, so hopefully it's a universal experience that folks are nice and happy and willing to entertain me, but maybe not. Okay, so let me walk you through how I do IBL. So a day in my classroom works like this. Students get outside readings before class. These are usually passages from textbooks that I've curated, specific chapters or problems to try, but they've also been podcasts. They've also been essays by various folks. They've also been YouTube videos or interactive websites. Again, sort of multiple modalities, trying to give folks a wide variety of ways to engage. And then during class, students present homework problems. So they get the homework before class, and then certain students are designated to present at each class. Anyone who does not present is called an investigator. Investigators ask questions. These can range anywhere from, why did you do this to get to that line, to I didn't understand any of that. Could you go over it again? To what is that defined as? To how did you come up with this? Right? The sorts of questions that we as grad students are probably a little used to asking. This, having done all remote, one of my goals for the next time I teach in person, which will probably be the fall, we'll see, who knows, is to print out little cards with, like a short list of questions and just sort of pass them out to folks to be like, how did you do blank? Right, and so just sort of hand them out and be like, ask one of these. So investigators ask questions. Both presenters and investigators get points. Both of these are graded things in my class. And then once we're through all the presentations, sometimes it takes all of class time, sometimes it doesn't. Otherwise, we discuss as a whole class various other problems or material, whether it's old homework, whether it's a part of a reading that didn't make sense, whether it's something we're going to move on to, that sort of stuff. And then we finish every class with exit tickets. Exit tickets are very, very brief, like the last 2 minutes of class, maybe. They are a question or two that I pose to class, like what made the most sense today, or what still needs addressing, or how did you feel about this topic, or can you give me another example of that topic? And Zoom has thankfully made these very, very easy to pull off, which is I just put the question in chat and then they all privately send me a sentence or two as an answer. Both of these, what's the other? Exit tickets are very good for, very small self-reflective things. It doesn't need to be a big, huge question. I have made the mistake of asking big, huge questions and then getting huge tracks that I had to read through. But mostly a question or two, a sentence or two. Even I've done stuff like, which derivative rule is your favorite, right? Things like this.
Ben, so I think
Yes,
Eva
Sam
has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Possibly.
Yes, what's up? I should have said at the start, please interrupt me all the time at any point, whatever.
I wanted to make sure I didn't interrupt too much though, because I'm getting overly excited.
You are
So
absolutely allowed
to. In terms of this, how do you make sure that this is a welcoming environment for sort of like quieter students or students that like want a while to process things? Like the let me digest this student, or like, I don't really want to be grading someone like, oh, you didn't ask enough questions in class or something
Sure.
like
So the way I've been doing investigation this past semester, at least, is so these are graded on a weekly basis. So there's a homework for the week, there's investigation, there's presentations for the week, there's investigation for the week. And so the way I've been grading investigations is if you contributed to class meaningfully, under my discretion of what that means, you get 1 out of 1 points for investigating. That's a very small thing. It's a tiny incentive. Folks who don't like to engage during class, if they're quiet or shy, thanks to Zoom, they can just type something in chat. If they're super quiet and shy, they can privately send me something in chat, in which case no one even needs to know that they asked a question, and it can just be to me. I'll still give them the point. Given that these were, again, sort of weekly assignments, if we got through class and no one did anything, they could post online and say, hey, I was wondering about this. I'll talk a little bit more about online at the very end. Varying degrees of success, that one. But again, the idea being multiple modalities. If they literally ask a question, great. If they just contribute to class meaningfully, whatever that means.
And I also had a question, Ben, like how large were these classes?
My classes ranged from my at max capacity was 36, I think.
Okay.
And ranging all the way down to an official roster of 12 that ended up being like 6 or 7 students.
Okay.
Which truthfully I found slightly more difficult because I could put the spotlight on folks and that sort of turned people off. Whereas with a big enough group, you can trust someone to pick up the slack if you're not feeling it. But that's still a thing that I'm turning over. Okay, so that's a day in my classroom. Again, a week in my classroom, I sort of said this, right? That students receive readings and homework before the week starts. They present throughout the week, including online. So the lion's share of presentations are done during class or by sharing screens, or if we ever meet in person, going up to a board. And then there are a couple that are online only, often in the early days of the semester delegated to students who don't want to talk during class. And then as the semester goes on, just sort of whoever gets them. All of the homework problems get seen and discussed before it is due, and then homework is turned in at the end of the week, meaning that all of these should be essentially free points if we're paying attention. Not always the case, frequently not the case, often not the case, but that's the intent behind it anyway. And then just briefly, a semester in my classroom, a few more policies of mine. Open resource policy, this one is probably the most radical one that I have, which is my policy is if you need information, if you look it up, if you need to pull something in order to answer a homework or whatever, you can use literally anything as long as it's acknowledged, as long as it's cited. This is one of those, and apologies, future Ben, because this is recorded and put on YouTube. This is one of those ask for forgiveness, not permission things. I have not necessarily vetted this with everyone in my department who may be interested in this, and I've gotten no complaints so far. I do enjoy the first day of class as we go through the syllabus, and then folks are like, wait, you mean I can use Wolfram Alpha? And I'm like, yes, as long as you cite it. I use Wolfram Alpha. That's not true, I use Mathematica, whatever. So this is sort of, again, chipping away at we live in an information age. As long as you're getting good, useful information, you tell me where it's from, that's fine. This also includes other students. Frequently, students will present homework problems. Students will, get used to what the solutions should look like, and then they will cite the person who did the presentation. Reflective essays, roughly once a month, I have a reflective essay at the end of each month. This past semester was 3 of them, I think, which are just sort of like exit tickets blown up, sort of the chance to take a step back and say, where am I in the semester as a student? How am I feeling? How do you feel about the work you're putting into the course? How do you feel about what I'm doing? How do you feel about what you're doing? How do you feel about your progress? et cetera, et cetera. 1 page graded for completion, right? As long as you do some critical thinking, as long as you say something, I'm satisfied. Homework resubmissions, up to a clearly communicated cutoff date. Any homework problems that are incorrect can be resubmitted for full credit. Students turn in homework by the due date. I grade it, I leave feedback on the problems that are wrong. Any problems with feedback, they can redo those ones, submit it, get them wrong, I leave more feedback, they can redo them. Get it wrong a third time, I leave more feedback, and so on, up until this cutoff for full credit. Right, this is mastery-based grading. Right, WebWork does this for you, or any number of online places. Here, I rushed and didn't have online homework, and so I did this all manually, which took some time, but I'm glad that I did. And no timed exams. Obviously, it's a math class. No timed exams. Who has test anxiety? This is a bad bias. We're all math grad students. We're probably all pretty decent at timed exams, probably by getting to this point. Anyway, many undergrads are not, and panic and freak out. And so one way of lessening that is take away the timing. You have a week to do this take home. Or my finals this past semester were all papers, for example.
And just to perhaps clarify on this point, so
yeah,
like you give them the test and they have open resource. So can they say like, I asked Max Stack Exchange and they said this was the answer and here's their solution? My
exams, my take-home exams are the only assignment in the whole class that they're not allowed to talk to people.
Okay.
They can use whatever resources they want, but they're not allowed to talk to other human beings.
All right. Yeah, that's fair.
Yep. Not that that's necessarily stopped them, probably. One student I had to pull aside because there was a math Discord, something, and I didn't know what Discord was at the time, and I still sort of don't. But it was fine. We figured it out. But it was an interesting question at the time. Anyway, those are some things that I do. But does it work? It's a math talk, so I feel like I should give a proof sketch. Here's the proof sketch. I think that some of the biggest takeaways from class were just how class was open to anyone with trouble on a question and how the students were a big part of what we were going to do in class. I appreciate many things from the class, from how we were encouraged to use each other as help, all the way to allowing late submissions on homework. I think that this class has been the most different from other traditional courses, but it has also been the class that I didn't mind getting up for. I learned how to better communicate with people I've never met before. I learned how to actually apply myself when stuff just seemed to be piling up. I can sit here and talk about all the math concepts that I walk away with, learning how to prove using contradiction, how to prove Fermat's little theorem, and so on, but that isn't the biggest thing that has stuck with me. Now, like any good proof sketch, this itself is not the full proof, but it gives you a sense of it.
I also just want to say I predicted Ryan's name to show up. So
you did earlier, and I did tell you you were wrong at the time. So because I was cognizant of this.
I'd like to submit for resubmission.
Unfortunately, the cutoff is in, I think, 3 minutes for me. So anyway, so a lot of this probably seems very radical, and that's because it is. As I said, I had the sort of benefit of jumping into my first post-degree profession, role. I just sort of got to dive in and say like, hey, I'm gonna do it this way. And that was very freeing in a sense and also terrifying. But I'd like to encourage this +1 mindset. Change one thing. One thing. Just find one thing that you think could be better, could fulfill these sorts of obligations, could overcome these obstacles, whether that's closed captioning on Zoom for students who need it, or having a open resource policy for one assignment, or exit tickets, which is one of the most accessible things. I had a tenured full professor in my department say like, man, exit tickets are the thing I always wanted to do, and it's been 30 years and I just never did it. And it's like, so do it now. one question, even one question a week with a 1 or 2 sentence answer. That's it. Exit tickets counted, I think, for 5% of my class's grade, right? Like very small. But you all know your classrooms better than I do, obviously. And again, I'm saying this as professor, and I know as TA, you might not have as much control necessarily, but I am certain you can find something that you can do. One more guess, name the scholar. You are not obliged to finish the work, neither can you desist from it. This one is a real scholar. This is from Pirkei Avot, which is a Jewish text on ethics. I couldn't find an actual author because the whole thing is multiple authors, but I do have one more example. Oh, no, future work, right? It's a math talk. I have to talk about future work. But I'm basically at time, so I will just stop here. And I think I have one more example at the end, but I'll stop here and take questions.
All right, cool. Well, I guess we can all go ahead and thank the speaker. And yeah, any questions for Ben?
Okay, I have a few. First, could you give a couple examples of courses where you think your version of IBL has worked really well, and then some examples where you didn't think it worked quite as well?
So I've taught 3 classes so far.
Awesome.
In my profession, outside of with this big focus. I taught discrete structures, which is discrete math with a computer science flavor. I taught quantitative reasoning, which is there's lots of math out there in the world. We should probably know how to interpret it. Non-major gen ed. And I taught business calc. Of them, probably business calc felt the most shoehorned in. QR was the best by far. QR at this point is now like my bread and butter. I start teaching it online in a week. QR was the best because it is very topics heavy. And so you can just sort of flit from like social choice to some probability to this thing, right? And having this sort of big churn of stuff, right, makes it more freeing in terms of try these new readings, try this new homework set. Business calc, by virtue of you have to get to, use substitution by the last week of class, right, sort of imposes this rigidity that's really hard to escape. And part of getting all this feedback and doing exit tickets and having self-reflective thought is being able to adjust on the fly.
Yeah, actually, that kind of feeds into another line of questions that I have. So it seems like there's a prodigious grading burden when you do things like this. So 1, how true is that? 2, how do you deal with that? 3, does that severely affect how scalable some of the stuff is?
Sure. So 1 is you get better at it with practice. I don't remember the order of your questions. 1 is you get better at it with practice. At this point, I can take a class of 30s exit tickets and process them in 10 minutes, which was not true in the fall when I started this. And then I would ask like multiple questions, and then I'd be overwhelmed. I've gotten much better at that. 2 is it is more of a grading burden. It is. I think that is. I would lie if I said otherwise. It is a bigger grading burden. Some of that is offset by, so far it seems like not a huge percentage of folks take up, homework resubmissions, and the things that don't require resubmission, right? Like my exams are just one and done, and so I just sort of go through and say like, you got an 80, and that's it, right? Right. All of the grading is the same in that sense. I also grade homework as follows. Each question gets 0 points if you put nothing, 1 point if you put something, 2 points if you're right. And so it's literally just like, I see a mistake, 1 point, here's what you messed up, next. Yep. Which helps cut down on it. Otherwise, a lot of it, right, the self-reflective essays are graded for completion. Don't tell my students this, but my finals were graded for completion. They were papers that they started 5 weeks before the end of the semester, and each week they had a page or 2 due on a specific thing. And sorry, future Ben, this is recorded on YouTube, I didn't really read them that closely, which is partially just grading at the end of the semester anyway. yes, higher grading burden, not so high as to be inhibitive. I don't know what adjective I'm going for there. Not enough to turn me off of this. Does require some work. Do get better as practice. A lot of ways to pull off IBL well is to put thought into design from the beginning.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For example, in the fall, I did not have cutoff dates for homework resubmissions. That was a mistake. I had students turning in homework 1 during finals week, that sort of thing.
Talk about grading burden.
Yeah, that is not true. In the spring, I had, here's the day it's cut off, whatever.
Okay, I have one more line of questioning, but I want to let somebody else ask before, if anyone has anything.
Did you experience any like what you would consider cheating, and if so, how did you deal with it? Like considering like your compassion like stance.
So cheating is very explicitly defined as you use a resource and you don't cite it. That's what it means for me, right? Is straight up plagiarism. Basically, I had a strike system, which was, like the first homework that gets turned in, and like clearly these people are all pulling from the exact same YouTube video or whatever, and it would just be like, welcome back to class, everyone. Let's talk for a moment about homework and citations and how this works, right? So yeah, I do still emphasize flexibility in that sense of like, they will mess up. Again, everything else crazy going on this year, it's not as important to me in this moment. If it's mid-semester, if it's past an exam, then it gets to be like, no, there's a very hard line that I've drawn and emphasized this whole semester, and we'll stick to it. I did not have to report anyone this year, thankfully.
Okay.
It's sort of the Gordian knot of cheating of like, you can use whatever, right? Like just sort of kind of like, yeah, use it. It's fine. Just tell me that you're using it. Sorry.
No, you're good. Does anyone else have anything before I ask my last?
There's something in chat.
Yeah, what is contract grading?
Contract grading. Contract grading is a thing I'm considering for the fall. Contract grading goes like this. It says on your syllabus, if you do 90% of the homework and you get at least a 50 on your quizzes, you get a B. End of story. If you do at least 90% of your homework and you do, you get at least 20% on your quizzes, you get a C or whatever, right? That each individual grade is broken down into like, if you show up and you do the thing, here's how much you do. It's not literally the points that contribute. Usually, at least the way I've seen contract grading is like, the standard is everyone gets a B, and then like, if you want to do a big final project and we go through it, you get an A, that sort of thing. The reason it's on future work is I'm teaching Calc 1 for math majors in the fall, which is of course a hugely coordinated class, common exams and all this stuff. And I'm not entirely sure if I can get away with this yet. I haven't done it yet. We'll see.
Actually, that feeds into my last line of questioning. So your coordinated Calc 1 class, do you plan to run it in an IBL fashion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. So the thing I was really wondering about, and that we've kind of in discussions of my friends about this kind of thing, we've run up against repeatedly, is that people I know who have done fully flipped classrooms or anything that may also fit under an IBL umbrella have had expressed a lot of issues with courses that have some sort of very well-defined content boundary that you really screw them over in their future if you cut off some of it. So we all have a lot of students that come in who are really not well served content-wise by the previous instructors, and then the graders weren't well served either, so they're not prepared to be graders or whatever. There's a whole chain. So I was wondering if you had thoughts about balancing the good learning outcomes for maybe the smaller amount of things you get to do in an IBL course versus sometimes you really need to get some sort of content.
It's a really good question that I don't have the answer to, but it is something that I think about quite often. Right, it's one thing to say for a topics course, like whatever we get to is fine, and it's another to do for calculus and say you have to learn what integration is. Yeah, I am still turning this over myself. It's a very good question that I've yet to thread that needle. the thing that buoys me in this is that there are many studies about how IBL is better for the learner. I didn't cite any of them here because I don't have time, and there's paywalls and stuff.
That's strike one. I'm sorry.
But man, and so there really is a sense, like pedagogically, like this is like the next way of doing this. And so in that sense, like I feel confident in the skills that folks are getting is worth it. As for really specific content stuff, I don't know. It's a good question.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I will at least scroll to the very end just so you guys can see the, come on, click. There it is. Okay. That's from MSRI when I got to meet Sam and Jason. That's a big whale statue and I posed next to it. Anyway, this is now immortalized on YouTube and recording. You're welcome, Ben.
Any other questions, comments for Ben? If not, let's thank Ben for the lovely talk again.
Thank you for having